There comes a moment in every generation when the weight of life becomes louder than the clarity of purpose, a moment when people across nations, cultures and backgrounds feel the same invisible pressure pressing on their minds, their emotions and their spirits. We are living in such a moment right now, a global moment, a human moment, a moment where the world is experiencing something deeper than stress, deeper than fatigue, deeper than confusion. The world is experiencing being overwhelmed. Being overwhelmed is not just a feeling, it is a condition of the soul. It is what happens when the demands of life exceed the capacity of the heart. It is what happens when the noise around you becomes louder than the voice within you. It is what happens when the future feels unclear, the present feels unstable, and the past feels unresolved. Being overwhelmed is the silent epidemic of our time. It crosses borders, it ignores languages, it touches the wealthy and the poor, the educated and the uneducated, the spiritual and the secular. It is the universal human experience of being stretched beyond what you feel you can handle. But being overwhelmed is not new. The Bible is filled with men and women who faced moments where life felt too heavy. Moses felt overwhelmed by leadership. Elijah felt overwhelmed by fear. David felt overwhelmed by betrayal. Paul felt overwhelmed by pressure. Even Jesus, in his humanity, felt the weight of the assignment in Gethsemane. Being overwhelmed is not a sign of weakness, it is a sign of humanity, but it becomes dangerous when it blinds your purpose and disconnects you from the clarity you need to move forward. The crisis of being overwhelmed begins in the mind. The mind is the battlefield of clarity. The mind is where purpose is either strengthened or suffocated. The mind is where the enemy plants confusion, fear, doubt and distraction. And the mind is where God plants vision, direction, wisdom and peace. Whoever controls your mind controls your life. That is why Proverbs says, "As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he." Your life will always move in the direction of your dominant thoughts. If your thoughts are scattered, your life will be scattered. If your thoughts are being overwhelmed, your decisions will be being overwhelmed. If your thoughts are confused, your path will be confused. One of the greatest challenges of this generation is the sheer volume of information we are exposed to. We are drowning in data but starving for wisdom. We know more but understand less. We hear everything but discern nothing. The human mind was not designed to process the constant noise of the digital age. You were not created to carry the weight of the world's problems every morning before breakfast. You were not designed to absorb the pain of millions of strangers in real time. You were not built to compare your life to thousands of people every day. The overload is not natural, so being overwhelmed is not accidental. It is the result of a world moving faster than the soul can process. And yet, in the middle of this global noise, God still speaks. He has not stopped speaking. He has not gone silent. He has not withdrawn his voice. The problem is not that God is silent. The problem is that we are being overwhelmed. Being overwhelmed does not silence God, it silences your ability to hear him. Being overwhelmed does not remove God's guidance, it removes your awareness of it. Being overwhelmed does not erase your purpose, it simply buries it under layers of noise, fear, and pressure. This is why clarity is not a luxury, it is a necessity. Clarity is the ability to see through the fog of life and recognize the direction of God. Clarity is the ability to separate what matters from what distracts. Clarity is the ability to hear the whisper of God above the roar of the world. Clarity is the foundation of purpose. Without clarity, you cannot move with confidence. Without clarity, you cannot make wise decisions. Without clarity, you cannot walk in peace. Clarity is the antidote to being overwhelmed. But clarity does not come from the world. It does not come from social media. It does not come from the news. It does not come from the opinions of people. Clarity comes from God. Clarity comes from the presence of God, the Word of God, and the wisdom of God. Clarity is the result of alignment. When your mind aligns with God's truth, your heart aligns with God's peace, and your steps align with God's direction. Let me tell you a story by Dr. Munroe. A young man once came to me after a conference, experiencing being overwhelmed by life. He said, "Dr. Munroe, I feel like I'm drowning. I have opportunities, but I don't know which one is right. I have dreams, but I don't know which one is mine. I have responsibilities, but I don't know which ones matter most. I feel like I'm carrying too much." I looked at him and said, "You are not being overwhelmed because you have too much to do. You are being overwhelmed because you have not decided what matters most." Being overwhelmed is not the presence of too many things. It is the absence of clear priorities. God is not the author of confusion. He is the author of clarity. When God speaks, He simplifies. When God leads, He clarifies. When God directs, He removes the unnecessary. When God guides, He brings order to chaos. The first thing God did in Genesis was bring order to disorder. The earth was without form and void, being overwhelmed, and God spoke light into the darkness. That is what clarity does. It brings light to the places where your mind feels dark. It brings order to the places where your emotions feel chaotic. It brings direction to the places where your decisions feel uncertain. Being overwhelmed often comes from trying to carry what God never asked you to carry. Many people are being overwhelmed because they are living outside their assignment. They are trying to please everyone. They are trying to fix everything. They are trying to be everywhere. They are trying to meet expectations God never placed on them. When you live outside your assignment, you will always feel being overwhelmed. But when you live inside your assignment, you will always find grace. Grace is the divine empowerment to do what God has called you to do. Grace does not make life easy, but it makes life possible. Moses learned this lesson. He tried to carry the weight of an entire nation on his shoulders. He tried to solve every problem, answer every question, and meet every need. And he became being overwhelmed. In Exodus chapter 18, Jethro told him, "The thing that thou doest is not good. Thou wilt surely wear away." In other words, Moses, you are being overwhelmed because you are carrying what God never asked you to carry. You are doing too much. You are trying to be everything to everyone. You need clarity. You need structure. You need alignment. Being overwhelmed is often a sign that you need to redefine your responsibilities. You need to identify what is truly yours and release what is not. You need to recognize what God has assigned to you and what God has assigned to others. You need to understand the difference between what is important and what is urgent. Urgency creates pressure. Importance creates purpose. Many people are being overwhelmed because they are living by urgency instead of importance. This is the beginning of the journey toward clarity. Learn more in Part 2.